Welcome to Diplomacy in International Relations by Bastian Freiborg. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into, well, one of the most pressing and often hidden global issues, human trafficking. Our focus is going to be squarely on Denmark's strategic efforts, how they're tackling it, and how that connects with the bigger international picture. We've gathered insights from Denmark's own action plan, reports from the European Commission, a really thorough evaluation from the Council of Europe's Greta Group.
That's the independent monitoring body, yeah. Crucial oversight.
Exactly. And also the latest global report on trafficking in persons from the UNODC. So our mission today is to cut through these sometimes quite dense reports, figure out what Denmark's doing, where the challenges are, and how it fits into the global fight. Basically giving you a shortcut to being really well informed on this. And just before we jump in, if you find these deep dives valuable, remember you can subscribe on Spotify. It's a small monthly fee, helps us keep the lights on, and you get access to extra episodes. The link's right there in the description. Okay, let's get into it. Human trafficking. It can feel like such a huge, almost abstract problem sometimes. So to ground this, where do we start with Denmark's actual approach? How do they define this crime in their laws? And, well, how long have they actually been focused on this?
Yeah, it's a good place to start. What's really key in Denmark is their clear legal foundation. It's not vague. Human trafficking is explicitly a crime under Section 262A of their criminal code. And the definition is quite broad, which is important. It covers, the whole process, recruiting someone, transporting them, housing them.
The whole chain of exploitation.
Exactly. Using coercion or deception or abusing a vulnerability, all for the purpose of exploitation. And that exploitation itself is defined broadly to sexual. Forced labor, slavery, even things like forced crime or organ removal.
So it really tries to capture all the different facets.
It does, and this lines up with their international commitments. Denmark ratified the UN's Palermo Protocol, which is really the cornerstone international agreement on trafficking.
Right, so they've integrated global standards into their national law. That's significant from an international relations perspective.
Definitely. It shows a clear policy decision.
And you mentioned they've been at this for a while. It's not a new thing for them.
Not at all. Denmark has had these rolling 4-year action plans specifically to combat human trafficking since way back in 2002.
Wow. Okay, so a sustained effort over 2 decades.
Yes, it demonstrates a long-term commitment. And the operational heart of it all is the Danish Center Against Human Trafficking, the CMM. That was set up in 2007. Think of it as the central hub coordinating the social initiatives nationwide.
And does the legal framework translate into action? Are people actually convicted?
Well, the data shows some activity. Between 2010 and 2016, for instance, there were 554 convictions under that specific trafficking law.
Okay, 554. So the system is working, at least to some extent, though maybe the numbers seem low, given the scale of the problem globally.
That's always the question, isn't it? How many are falling through the cracks? Which brings us to identification.
Yeah, that seems like the absolutely critical first step. Identifying victims. These people are often hidden, maybe don't even see themselves as victims, or they're just terrified. How does Denmark actually try to find them? It sounds like it has to be more than just police work, right?
Oh, absolutely. Identification is incredibly complex, and it relies on a really broad multi-agency approach. It has to. The responsibility for that initial outreach, that first contact, it's spread across lots of different authorities and organizations. Think about the Danish Working Environment Authority or the tax agency, even trade unions. They might spot signs of forced labor during inspections.
Right, in workplaces.
Exactly. And the police, of course, encounter victims during operations, maybe in prostitution environments or other areas. Plus, the CMM itself runs services directly, like health clinics or drop-in centers. There's one called Madestad in Copenhagen, specifically for foreign women in prostitution.
So offering a safer, maybe less official feeling point of contact.
Precisely. Building trust is key. And the action plan also specifically funds NGOs to do outreach work, too, trying to cast a wider net.
Okay, so a lot of different actors involved. What about new steps? Are they trying different things to improve identification, especially recently?
Yes. The 2019-2021 action plan specifically focused on enhancing this. One big push is to prepare a broader group of professionals for that first contact. We're talking social workers, municipal staff, healthcare workers in emergency rooms, maybe even staff at STD clinics or shelters. People who might encounter victims but aren't specifically looking for trafficking.
Equipping them to recognize the signs.
Exactly, giving them the training, the awareness. There's also an effort to inform landlords about potential signs in rental properties.
Interesting. And technology.
Yeah, they're exploring an electronic anonymous reporting option on the CMM website. so individuals or businesses could report suspicions safely.
That makes sense, lowering the barrier to report.
Right. And they're also looking at streamlining the existing health and drop-in services, maybe spreading them out more geographically, and even setting up special focus groups like one in Copenhagen focusing specifically on identifying more child victims, which is always a huge challenge.
Child victims, yes.
Yeah.
Extremely vulnerable. So, okay, let's say a potential victim is identified. What happens next? What kind of support do they get, especially if they're not Danish citizens? This feels like where human rights and international policy really intersect on a personal level.
It does. For foreign nationals identified as victims, even if they're in the country unlawfully, Denmark offers what they call a reflection and recovery period. It starts at 30 days.
Okay, a breathing space.
Exactly. And it can be extended up to 120 days, particularly if the victim cooperates with the authorities on what's called prepared repatriation.
Prepared repatriation. What does that involve? Is it just sending them back?
No, the goal is supposedly to help them safely restart their life back in their home country or country of residence. It comes with reintegration support for 6 months. They could be help with housing, maybe funds to start a small business, education, or just basic living costs like food or school fees for kids.
So practical support for rebuilding.
That's the aim. And for unaccompanied minors, there's a personal representative assigned to support them, focusing on the child's best interests. They also set up a specific Danish return agency in 2020 to handle the operational side of these returns.
Right. On paper, that sounds quite comprehensive, a real policy commitment there. But the sources, especially that Greta report, seem to flag some really serious problems with this. Low uptake of repatriation, major safety concerns. What's the reality check here?
This is where it gets really tough. The Greta report is quite critical. It notes that actually only few victims accept this prepared repatriation also.
Why, if the support is there?
The reasons are often grim: intense pressure and threats from traffickers who still exert control, or maybe complex family obligations back home that make returning seem impossible or even dangerous.
So fear is a major factor.
Huge. But Greta also raised serious concerns about inadequate risk assessments before people are returned, especially to certain countries like Nigeria and Kenya were mentioned. The worry is that the authorities there just can't, or maybe won't, protect them from being re-trafficked or facing retaliation.
Oh.
The report even includes some harrowing firsthand accounts, victims suffering severe physical abuse after returning, even children being kidnapped back home to pressure the parents.
That's horrifying. So the system, however well-intentioned in Denmark, hits a wall when faced with the reality in the home country.
That seems to be the crux of it. The external pressures, the reach of these criminal networks can make a safe return incredibly difficult, undermining the whole program for many. It really exposes that gap between policy design and the harsh realities on the ground.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. What about bringing the traffickers themselves to justice? There was that case mentioned, Operation Successive in 2015, involving exploitation of Romanians. That sounded like a significant success, didn't it?
It definitely was highlighted as one. It showed effective police work and prosecution, dismantling a network involved in economic and cyber fraud using trafficked individuals. The organizers got pretty substantial prison sentences, 3 to nearly 8 years. So it demonstrates that Denmark can tackle these complex cross-border cases.
Again, cooperation helps.
Absolutely. There's long-standing Nordic police cooperation, which apparently intensified after 2015, shifting focus more towards trafficking itself, not just smuggling. That kind of collaboration is vital.
Is that case the exception or the rule? What does Greta say about overall conviction rates?
Well, that's the counterpoint. While HFIP-SIBO was a success, the Greta report suggests that overall the number of convictions for human trafficking remains relatively low, especially, interestingly, for labor exploitation, even though the number of victims identified for that purpose has actually increased.
A mismatch there.
Yeah. And another point raised was that sometimes the sentences given out might not seem fully proportionate to just how severe the crime of human trafficking is. That affects deterrence, potentially.
Something else that really jumped out at me was this issue of victims potentially being prosecuted themselves. For minor offenses, like having fake papers they were forced to use, how does Danish law handle that? It seems incredibly unjust.
It's a really critical point, and it goes right to the heart of the non-punishment principle in the Palermo Protocol, which Denmark has signed.
The idea that victims shouldn't be punished for crimes they were forced into.
Exactly. Punishing them effectively re-victimizes them. Danish law does address this. Section 722 of their Administration of Justice Act allows charges to be dropped if the crime is directly linked to their trafficking situation and isn't considered serious. Things like illegal stay, minor forgery, begging, maybe petty theft committed under duress.
So the mechanism exists.
It does. And the Director of Public Prosecutions has even issued guidelines encouraging prosecutors to waive charges in these cases. However, Greta found these guidelines aren't always consistently applied, particularly concerning child victims, which is worrying.
Why not? What's the barrier?
Often it seems to come down to a lack of specialized knowledge about trafficking among, say, defense lawyers. If the victim isn't properly identified as trafficked within the legal process, then this non-punishment provision might just get overlooked.
And what about compensation for the victims? For everything they've been through, is that something they can actually get?
Theoretically, yes. Victims are entitled to claim compensation, either from the traffickers directly if they're caught and have assets, or from the state. But again, the Greta report flags this as a major issue, expressing concern about the low number of victims who actually receive any compensation.
Why is it so hard?
The system seems quite complex. There are strict eligibility rules, high thresholds for proving moral damages. It seems many well-founded claims just don't get through the bureaucratic hurdles.
So the practical reality is different from the entitlement on paper.
Very much so. The report mentioned very few state compensation claims being processed successfully. I think only 3 moral damages claims since 2016 were cited. That's incredibly low.
And that compensation could be vital for rebuilding their lives, preventing re-victimization.
Absolutely. It's not just about the money. It's about acknowledgement and providing resources to escape the cycle of vulnerability.
Okay, stepping back to the bigger picture, this is obviously not just a Danish problem. How do Denmark's efforts fit into the wider international European fight against trafficking?
Well, Denmark is definitely plugged into international cooperation. As we said, they're party to the Palermo Protocol. Within Europe, their CMM participates in the EU's network of national rapporteurs that's key for sharing information and coordinating responses across borders.
So they're talking to their neighbors.
Yes, and there's specific Nordic cooperation too, including a network focused on trafficking of children within the Nordic region. The UNODC Global Report really underscores how vital these international agreements are. It suggests that countries with strong laws, yes, but also robust migration policies, decent labor rights, and refugee protection, they tend to be better at identifying victims.
So it's about a holistic approach, not just the criminal law aspect.
Exactly. It connects human rights, security, international policy. It's all intertwined.
And that UNODC report, it highlighted some recent global trends, too, some quite surprising things, I thought.
Yeah, a couple of really eye-opening points. One was that the number of detected victims globally actually went down in 2020 for the first time in 20 years.
Down during the pandemic. That seems counterintuitive.
Right. But the analysis suggests it's likely because pandemic restrictions made trafficking just go more underground. Harder to spot, harder for victims to escape or seek help. Not necessarily less trafficking happening.
So a decrease in detection, not necessarily a decrease in the crime itself, a dangerous shift.
Precisely. The report also flagged the increasing use of technology by traffickers. For everything recruitment online, controlling victims, coordinating the exploitation, they adapt fast.
And the types of exploitation are changing, too.
There's a noted rise in detected cases of forced labor and also forced criminality, forcing victims to commit crimes. And interestingly, this often targets men, which kind of challenges the common perception that trafficking is solely or primarily about sexual exploitation of women.
Right, broadening the victim profile we need to be aware of. The report also linked trafficking risk to wider global issues, didn't it? Like conflict and climate change.
Yes, absolutely. It makes that connection very clear. Conflicts, like the war in Ukraine, create massive displacement. Even with temporary protection measures in receiving countries, people fleeing conflict are incredibly vulnerable, desperate, separated from support networks, easy targets for traffickers.
A predictable, tragic consequence of war.
And similarly with climate change, the report gives the example of the Sundarbans region in Bangladesh. Climate-induced poverty, loss of livelihoods due to environmental change. It pushes people into desperate situations where they become susceptible to forced labor or debt bondage.
Just trying to survive.
Exactly. It shows how these huge global stressors, conflict, climate change, poverty, create fertile ground for exploitation and really complicate anti-trafficking efforts worldwide.
Well, this has certainly been a comprehensive deep dive. It really highlights the complexity, doesn't it? We see Denmark's structured approach, the laws, the agencies, but also these persistent, really difficult challenges.
Yeah.
Identifying victims, ensuring their safety after repatriation, making the justice system truly effective, and then these huge global forces at play.
It's a multi-layered problem with no easy answers. Policy intentions are one thing, but the reality on the ground, influenced by crime networks and global instability, is often quite another.
So thinking about this, what should you, our listener, take away? Maybe it's worth considering how much our own societal structures, maybe border policies, economic pressures, how they might inadvertently create vulnerabilities that traffickers exploit.
Or how technology is becoming such a double-edged sword in this fight.
Right. It's definitely something to mull over, the interconnectedness of it all, far beyond just Denmark. Thank you for joining us on Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Freiborg. If you found this deep dive insightful, please do follow us and maybe leave a 5-star rating if you can. It really helps us reach more people who are interested in these vital global topics. And don't forget, you can subscribe on Spotify for extra content. The link's in the description. We look forward to our next deep dive with you.